Hola, I'm Gerson Borrero, editor-at-large for City and State, and today we have the privilege of being with a very well-known Puerto Rican who I disagree with politically on everything, but he is loved by all Puerto Ricans because he's committed his life to the service of the people of Puerto Rico. His name is Kenneth McClintock. You know him from last year. We'll actually link the interview from last year. Kenneth, good to see you.
Glad to be here, but I'd never known before in the years that I've known you that you were a Republican.
Don't hold your breath. We're in the rotunda of a place that you have devoted your adulthood to, which is, this is where the place where laws are made, deals are brokered between parties. You presided the Senate. I mean, the only position you haven't held is actually governor of Puerto Rico in terms of importance.
But I've been acting governor.
You've been acting
times.
Governor, there you go. And you got enough of it. Kenneth, from your vantage point, you're out of politics. You've told us before that you're not interested in politics. Give us your understanding, your appraisal, because last year you were very optimistic. You even spoke to the diaspora of investing and buying property in Puerto Rico so it could stimulate construction on the island. A year later, we're a few weeks away from Somos conference here in Puerto Rico. Where is Puerto Rico at from your vantage point?
Well, first of all, welcome to one of the 5 most beautiful state capitals in the nation. As the first Hispanic chairman of the Council of State Governments, I visited 31 state capitals. And in terms of structure, this is one of the 5 most beautiful ones. And it's actually, and there will be outtakes, I'm sure, of the rest of the building during your program, it was designed following the design of the Columbia Library, Columbia University Library, the old library. So, take a look after we finish our interview. And in terms of location, and this is real estate, it's the best located in the nation. Location, 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 right in front of the Atlantic Ocean. But getting back to your question, I still have some sense of optimism about Puerto Rico, in part because we're so close to the next election. And I think it is obvious
the presidential election.
The presidential and the gubernatorial election in Puerto Rico. And I think it is obvious to absolutely everybody in Puerto Rico that there is going to be a change in government in Puerto Rico. The current governor, his approval rating was at 19% last March, and it's probably gone down since. So there will be a change in government, there'll be a change in philosophy. And my impression is that any new government that comes in, regardless of who presides over it, will give that new governor the opportunity to instill a sense of trust and confidence that does not exist today among the investment community in New York and Wall Street regarding Puerto Rico. And the first step you have to take to recover economically is to instill trust and confidence in the investors that loan you the money that allow you to operate, and in the people that are with water up to their necks and are trying to find some sort of relief.
In all fairness to Governor Alejandro Garcia Padilla, last year when we spoke, I recall that you pointed out that the last governor who actually got a second term was Pedro Rosselló González.
Yeah.
And that we've been turning governors, it's just the people decide, tired of you, 4 years, get out of here. So that's a reflection of that, or is it worse in the case of this governor? Has he made things worse, and was he valiant, courageous in saying, the debt crisis here, we cannot pay back our money?
I think that's been his biggest mistake as governor.
Really, why?
If I'm meeting with you and you're my bank branch manager and I'm asking you for a loan and my cell phone rings, I say, oh, Harrison, hold on a second. It's my bankruptcy lawyer calling to see when we're filing. Can I call you back later? Okay. Now, what were we talking about? About a loan?
Right.
You're not going to give me a loan if you think I'm dealing with a bankruptcy lawyer. How are you going to get Wall Street to help out if you tell them, I'm not going to pay you, I can't pay you? The fact is that Puerto Rico's debts can be paid. They only represent 15 or 16% of our total revenue. If you only spend 85% of what you collect, you can pay your debts.
But there are those these vultures, these robber barons in Wall Street are the ones that are the main culprits of the condition that Puerto Rico is, because in their greed, they've made the situation, it's, san dame dame, nunca san toma, never to give back.
First, let's see who is what. The bonds were originally bought by you, by me, by moms and pops that were deciding where to invest their retirement money so that they would get an adequate yield and that it would be a safe investment. And investing in Puerto Rico bonds was a very, very, very safe investment. And it provided a yield somewhat higher, and more important than that, triple tax-free, so that you wouldn't have to pay taxes on your income. Now then, when this fiscal crisis comes about, when a year and 1 month into Governor Garcia Padilla's term, the credit agencies declare Puerto Rico to be in junk bond status. There are people that are desperate for their money, and they had bought at 99 or 101 or 100 their bonds, at face value, but they needed the cash. They had a cancer crisis, their daughter was getting married, kids in college, retirement, whatever. So then here are some people that come around and say, well, I'll give you 60 cents on the dollar. And they say, okay, well, I will sell because I need the money. I prefer to get 60 cents now than to hope that someday I may get
the full dollar.
The full dollar. And then those we call vultures. They are opportunistic, I recognize, because they saw an opportunity to make an investment that others were not willing to make, and to resolve a problem to people that had a cash flow problem. So I'm very careful now. You live off your ratings. I don't live off ratings, so I don't have to call hedge funds vultures. They're a necessary part of the financial system in any economy. What would you propose instead? That mom and pop have to hold onto a bond that is not producing dividends because you're not going to allow anybody to buy it for less than face or significantly less than face value to protect them? They need cash. And they're at the end of the run. They can't go back to work. They're 69, 75 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody came along and said, I'm offering you an alternative.
Just a point of clarification. I don't call them vultures. I can't say exactly what I call them. There's other people that are, that's a more common, nice name. Okay. I call them something that we can't say here.
But probably nobody's ever presented them from the point of view that I have.
Okay.
They came in and they offered.
I understand. It's the American way.
They offered a solution.
Exploit the people that are in need and go ahead. That's right.
No, but if you didn't allow them to do that,
right,
and you're 75 years old, you have a bond that you bought for $100.
Yeah.
It's worth $60. They stopped paying dividends on it several years ago. Banco Popular, por ejemplo, Banco Popular stock
right,
was 6 years without paying a dividend when they'd always paid very generous dividends. Well, people go and sell it in the stock market. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a buyer to buy it, then you can't sell it.
Okay, so we're talking Wall Street. Let me move from what is your perception, opinion, and you still maintain Home for Puerto Rico. There are others in a similar situation. Let's move to Wall Street, stay in Wall Street, New York, and take it to the national scene. There was a recent debate, the first debate of Democratic candidates, 5 people on stage. Your candidate, Hillary Rodham Clinton, which is the person that you've been associated with the Clintons forever.
Your former senator.
My former senator, absolutely. You know how to hurt a guy, don't you? It wound up that she had a debate, good performance by most standards in terms of that. There was a discussion about Wall Street. You're leading into, there's a primary here. I don't know exactly how you're going to structure it
June
this time.
June 5th.
Right, June 5th. You also have
It'll be a primary or caucus,
depending on, you haven't decided yet. And you are going to be going through the process. I know you're on the DNC, you advise them and they depend on you, you'll bring them down. Hillary will be here, Bernie Sanders, nobody knows here. The fact that he's already calling himself a socialist is gonna be like crazy here, see what happens. So let's assume that Hillary barre el piso, she just clears the deck in here in Puerto Rico, which you expect her to do. She's very popular here, Democratic candidate. You go into the convention, should the diaspora, New York, Florida, the numbers that exist in Philadelphia where Puerto Ricans have migrated to, what should Puerto Ricans and the diaspora be doing? I know it's against the interests of your candidate, but in terms of the Democratic National Committee, I mean, Governor Cuomo has stepped up. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He seems to be, it wasn't just a photo op, I criticized him for that. What should the Democratic Party and your candidate be held accountable for?
In terms of what? The fiscal crisis?
Of course, the fiscal crisis, the limbo, the political limbo, the Commonwealth status, which is a colony. We agree it's a colony.
Yeah, the first thing is remind them that they've been complicit for decades in not resolving Puerto Rico's political status problem.
That includes Hillary Rodham Clinton.
That includes Hillary Rodham Clinton. She has taken a very good position in terms of supporting the solution of Puerto Rico's political status question. But we have to go farther than that. We have to actually resolve the political status question. If Puerto Rico were a state today, or if Puerto Rico were independent today, it would not be in the fiscal crisis that it is as a colony of the United States. Why? Because if we were a state, we wouldn't have to issue so many bonds. Why? Because if you build a road in the colony, you have to put up 50% of the cost of the road. So you got to issue $50 million in bonds for a $100 million road. If you're a state, in certain roads, the federal government will put up 83% of the money, and you put up 17% of the money. So you would only have to issue 1/3 of the bonds necessary to build that road, 50 million versus 17 million. The day that we're on the verge of becoming a state, part of the negotiating process of an admissions bill will include seeing how could the federal government help the incoming state on issues particular to that state. In the case of Alaska, they own no lands. All the lands were federally owned. So the federal government included in the admissions bill a 103 million acre land grant for the new state of Alaska. If they gave us 103 million acres, we would own the Canary Islands, because there's not 103 million acres in Puerto Rico. But what would we ask for? Since a great deal of our debt was incurred because we were a colony and because we were not a state, have the federal government assume the payment of a portion of that public debt. Not the $73 million, not $50 million, but perhaps 35 or 25 billion of those $72 billion in debt, because it is debt that has been the cost of colonization and the cost of creating American-sized quality of life expectations in Puerto Rico without providing American-sized state-like assistance to Puerto Rico. So that's one way that we can hold the federal government accountable. But the day she becomes President of the United States, and until we become a state, there's a number of things that she can propose. I wrote a column for her in Nuevo Dia newspaper back in maybe July or August, where I said 14 things that what the White House can do for Puerto Rico. And it involved a whole number of things, from the big to the very granular and small. But they were all ideas to help Puerto Rico, and more than help the government, help the people of Puerto Rico have money in their pockets, the product of their efforts and working. And that's what we have to be doing.
The Democratic Party, we have a president.
Now, excuse me, you asked me, what should the diaspora be doing?
Yeah.
First thing of all is go out and register to vote.
For what?
Second, every opportunity that you have to go out and vote, vote. You know why? Because the moment that you turn out and vote, and the exit polls report that 90% of Puerto Ricans actually registered, and 80% of the 90% that registered turned out to vote, then you are a political force to be dealt with. Then they will come around and say, Gerson, what are your concerns? How can I help you? But if you only have 30% turnout, they'll say, we don't give a damn about what Gerson's concerns are, because he doesn't vote, he doesn't participate. And once you have that high turnout once, from then on down, you answer the question, what for? Because then you have the power for them to have to hear you. Right now you can do marches down Fifth Avenue, but if only 30% of the people that walk down Fifth Avenue vote, whereas 55% of the Irish that walk down Fifth Avenue vote. They're going to pay more attention to the Irish and to the Puerto Ricans.
But as a matter of fact, on November 7th, as part of the Somos conference, not November 5th, there's going to be a rally here. It's supposed to be, so we'll see what happens there.
To do what?
To say that, remember Puerto Rico, be fair with Puerto Rico. I mean, it's a protest.
Well,
you don't do it, you go to
here.
Washington.
You go to Washington.
Okay, but let me ask you, when Washington comes here, I remember in front of that ocean, that great ocean there, it's 2009, January 2nd, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
President-elect as our governor, Luis Fortuño, at that point, he's elected U.S. Secretary of State.
Yeah.
He sends an emissary with a letter in which this emissary, as president-elect, he said, among other things, that's Barack Obama, first black president, and still 18 days before he was sworn in, a commitment with Puerto Rico. You recall the letter I'm talking about?
I'll resolve your political status problem in my first term in office.
And here he is, we're a year and a half away from him going.
In the first 2 years, he had a Democratic majority in the Senate, and he had a Democratic majority in the House.
And he could have done it.
No excuses.
What do you tell then? Well, how can people trust the Democratic Party? You're asking them to register to vote. That was a complete as we call it in New York, complete disrespecting.
Republican presidents have gone farther. They said, I support statehood for Puerto Rico.
So what are we doing wrong?
And then nothing happened.
Do they like colonies?
First,
is the U.S. a hypocrite?
First, we're not totally organized. And second, the leaders of the diaspora are not united, and they're actually working against the will of the people of Puerto Rico.
Which is to end the colony.
Which is to end the colony.
Regardless of whether it's independent.
Luis Gutierrez is not trying to end the colony. He's in bed with all the special interests in Puerto Rico that want tax benefits for the multinational corporations.
You realize you just said that Luis Gutierrez is in bed. You said that, right?
Is in bed with the big manufacturing
I just want to make
multinational companies. Okay. And then you have Nidia Velázquez that puts her support of the colony above the interests of the people of Puerto Rico. They're fellow Democrats. I like them on other things. We're united in immigration and other issues, but on Puerto Rico's political status, we're very far apart. Really? And then people pay more attention in Washington to Luis and Nidia than they pay attention to the elected resident commissioner from Puerto Rico, even though the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico represents 5 times more people than any of them represent, because they represent congressional districts.
But they vote out there.
Pierluisi represents 5 congressional districts. And not only 5 congressional districts, but the 5 congressional districts that are populated entirely, 100%, by the affected people. Because Nidia and Luis represent districts, in her case a little bit more, his less, districts that have some Puerto Ricans, but are not composed entirely of Puerto Ricans, as Pedro Pierluisi's 5 congressional districts represent.
Exit question for you, Kenneth McClintock. Somos conference is coming. It's a New York-driven kind of, from the New York State Legislature. You're very familiar with it. We've already seen the optics from those in the legislature and from Governor Cuomo, the leading Democrat. What are they missing, and what's your message to them in the diaspora?
I haven't seen the agenda this year, but based on previous agendas that are normally geared and controlled by the party in power in Puerto Rico, and I was the party in power in Puerto Rico, was invited to speak many times. I know how it works. The big mistake is you have to remember that Puerto Rico is a democracy. And in the same way that if you want to get something done in New York, you got to go see the Democrats that control the House and the governorship, you also have to speak to the Republicans that control the Senate and that sometimes control the city of New York or whatever, it was Bloomberg or whoever it may be. In Puerto Rico, you have to see that there's a variety of points of view, and that all those points of view should be represented in the information intake that is the main reason why you come to Puerto Rico in the first place, for Somos. And be aware this time around that you're coming here when it'll be basically 12 months before the election, and that the people that speak to you from the administration in Puerto Rico have a waning mandate that will most probably, for political and for historical reasons. Historical reasons because we switch governments every 4 years, and for political reasons because the numbers simply are not there for the governor to get reelected. To be aware that you don't want to be left out from hearing the point of view of the people that will be governing Puerto Rico during 4 of the next 5 years.
Kenneth McClintock,
okay.
Pleasure having you again at City and State TV. I'm Gerson Borrero. We'll see you at Somos.